The Salute as Signifier, an analysis of Elon Musk's infamous gesture, by Amber Hayward. On January 20th, 2025, at an inauguration rally for the recently re-elected Donald Trump, Elon Musk sent shockwaves throughout the world by making a Nazi Sig Heil salute, once towards the audience and another towards the president. As this video clip began to virally circulate around the internet, the dialogue quickly became a debate as to whether this was truly a Nazi or Roman-style salute, or if it was merely an awkward gesture due to Musk's neurodivergence. Meanwhile, many far-right-leaning individuals applauded Musk and felt emboldened by the gesture. Others made memes that turned it into a cynical joke, and Musk himself made several tweets joking and making light of the accusations, without ever directly denouncing any claims about the fascistic message of the gesture. The confusion as to how to interpret his salutes was amplified by the Anti-Defamation League, an organization that allegedly exists to combat anti-Semitism, who claimed it was an excited gesture and most assuredly not a Nazi salute. To add fuel to the flames of confusion, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rushed to Musk's defense, claiming that Musk was being victimized by a smear campaign surrounding the supposedly innocuous gesture. However, from an international standpoint verified by many historians and political experts, his gesture left little room for interpretation, and in fact would have been considered a criminal offense in Germany and other countries. This paper intends to analyze Elon Musk's salute and its subsequent interpretation and circulation within the media, using the lexicon of several prominent figures within the field of critical media theory. Whether Musk intended the salute as a blatant fascist gesture or if it was somehow accidental is mostly irrelevant, as it has now embedded itself within the public consciousness as a symbolic representation of the present political aims of the United States ruling elite. In Ideology and Ideological State Apparatuses, Louis Althusser describes the act of interpellation, or hailing, as an ideological tool to turn individuals into subjects. He equates this idea metaphorically to the act of a police officer saying, "Hey, you there," in the streets, and an individual turning around to acknowledge that this hailing was directed towards them. Althusser writes, "Experience shows that the practical telecommunication of hailings is such that they hardly ever miss their man. Verbal call or whistle, the one hailed always recognizes that it is really him who is being hailed." Althusser, 1971, page 86. This concept can be readily applied to Musk's gesture, as a literal hailing to invoke an alliance and establish dominance with those who identify with fascist and neo-Nazi ideology, as well as a hailing to incite fear in those who don't ascribe to the symbolic meaning of the gesture. Within Althusser's framework of understanding ideological state apparatuses as tools to placate individuals while reinforcing ruling class goals, the Anti-Defamation League and Netanyahu could be considered agents of ISAs to obscure the salute's intended meaning so it could be infused into the public consciousness with less resistance. This can also be applied through the lens of Stuart Hall's article Encoding Decoding, as a tactic by the media to reduce the incidence of large portions of the public perceiving this message through an oppositional code. Hall writes, "One of the most significant political moments, they also coincide with crisis points within the broadcasting organizations themselves, for obvious reasons, is the point when events which are normally signified and decoded in a negotiated way begin to be given an oppositional reading. Here the politics of signification, the struggle and discourse, is joined." Hall, 1980, page 173. In this instance, Musk's gesture may have in fact been an unplanned provocation that the media was not prepared for, and so public relations teams may have collaborated with these public figures to obscure the meaning of the message to minimize public outrage in order to continue a business-as-usual approach. Alternatively, those public figures who denounced the unmistakable gesture as a Nazi salute may have been bribed in order to strengthen an allegiance in regards to the Israeli occupation of Palestine, but this remains in the arena of conjecture. From the perspective of Jody Dean's understanding of communicative capitalism, one can assert the significance of the avenues of circulation through which discourse over Musk's infamous gesture took place. The primary vehicle for public response to this incident was through social media, particularly through the Musk-owned enterprise X. Dean writes, "The use value of a message is less important than its exchange value, its contribution to a larger pool, flow, or circulation of content. A contribution need not be understood, it need only be repeated, reproduced, forwarded. Circulation is the context, the condition for the acceptance or rejection of a contribution." Dean, 2005, page 59. Through the viral spread and memification of his gesture, we can see the insidious nature of Musk's exorbitant power and influence as both provocateur and venture capitalist. Regardless of how the gesture was received, any kind of social media reaction to this act helps to fill Musk's pockets and reinforce his political aims. The primary means of public outcry over his behavior has been commodified and circulated among an oversaturated stream of content, thus losing its gravitas and pushing the act further into obscurity, leaving the masses confused and traumatized with no avenue for responding in a meaningful or political way. This can be further applied through the theories of Guy Debord in his article The Commodity is Spectacle, in which he writes, "In all its specific forms, as information or propaganda, as advertisement or direct entertainment consumption, the spectacle is the present model of socially dominant life. It is the omnipresent affirmation of the choice already made in production and its corollary consumption. The spectacle's form and content are identically the total justification of the existing system's conditions and goals." Debord, 1977, page 118. Amidst the backdrop of the present political landscape, it is naive to deny the aims of Elon's public performance as a spectacle to reinforce the dominant ideological current. As such, Musk's gesture acts as a floating signifier, whose power lies precisely in its ambiguity, allowing consumers to attach their own meaning or jouissance to the spectacle. Whether this provocation was a joke, an accident, or a serious assertion of oligarchical power is up to the consumer's interpretation, and thus reinforces the power of the act precisely through its ability to be misconstrued. Regardless of what one thinks the meaning behind Musk's gesture was, it created a traumatic reaction that continues to reverberate throughout the public consciousness. To cope with the perverse implications of Musk's floating signifier, the public's reaction can be understood through the lens of Slavoj Žižek's concept of cynical disavowal. In The Sublime Object of Ideology, he writes, "What they overlook, what they misrecognize, is not the reality, but the illusion which is structuring their reality, their real social activity. They know very well how things really are, but still they are doing it as if they did not know." Žižek, 1989, page 30. Instead of facing directly the profound implications of this gesture amidst the backdrop of current affairs, it is easier for an individual to create a cynical distance between themselves and the content, to relieve dissonance and resume their daily lives. The media reinforces this distance through its use of comedy, as well as through the brief time spans between reels, memes, tweets, and other short-form media. One can have a small emotional reaction to the content, respond to it with a short click of a button or brief comment, and feel they have contributed to the discourse, before moving on to another unrelated spectacle. In daily conversation, mentions of these topics are often equally brief and glossed over, as the short-form media has reduced attention spans and hurled consumers into a state of confusion and traumatized alienation from reality. The true weight of Elon Musk's Sig Heil lies precisely in the fact that it was not an isolated incident, but just another shock value display of a ruthless power that is spreading to all corners of the world and within the very minds of the masses. It is especially naive to deny the purpose of Musk's salute, considering the trajectory that has emerged since the 2025 inauguration. It is thus profoundly useful to analyze current media using the tools of intellectual theorists, precisely to understand the full impact of the content one consumes, and be given a choice in how to participate and respond. There is a reason why the Marxist theoretical traditions are considered dangerous threats to the dominant power structures, because critical analysis gives an individual the means to dissect and confront the institutions and hierarchies that maintain capitalism's malignant grip on humanity. We have reached a point where the algorithmically and AI-powered media is thinking steps ahead of us, and we can hardly wrap our heads around the full extent of its grip on our conscious experience. The analysis of media may be precisely what one needs to take a step back from manufactured reality and reorient themselves in the material world and within their immediate community. We have established the sense of powerlessness that results from engaging with digital media, and perhaps the only option to gain a sense of power and agency is through a radical reconnection to the world that exists behind our screens and all around us. Thus, this media analysis leads to the conclusion that only through our collective power outside the realm of the digital will we ever stand a chance at confronting the current ideological forces in our media-driven reality.